it's really good to be here. Really great to meet so many interesting people and hear so much interesting stuff. My name's Stephen Hopper. Steve, to my friends, you can call me Steve. And I'm a coach. I work in an area called transformational coaching. I work with people in business, with entrepreneurs, with small business, but I also work with artists, performers, professional creatives, particularly in film and television. And I always find it surprisingly difficult to say what I do. And essentially, I'm all about helping people to find their own gift, their own talent, to get the best out of themselves, to get the best out of their work, to get the best out of their life, to get the best out of their opportunities. And just as I was listening this morning, I was reminded of this quote. It's not going to work. I might click it down. Turn it on. Sorry. This is something Howard Thurman was a black rights activist in the mid-20th century and one of Martin Luther King's mentors. And he said this amazing thing: don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive. And go and do that, because what the world needs is people who've come alive. And I thought of that this morning as I've listened to everyone, so I just threw it in before I start. So there are some things that really fascinate me about working with people. One of them is, how do we come alive? How do we create change? How do we create the new? And how do we make a difference, not only in our own lives, but in widening circles around us? Anyway, I've known Adelina 10 years, something like that. And Adelina asked me a few weeks ago to come and talk about well-being and sustainability and change. And I thought, that's a really great topic. I've no idea what I'm going to say about that, but fortunately I do now. I've had some thoughts. And essentially, the conversation, there's a great conversation in our culture about well-being and health. Particularly physical health and mental health. But I would like to suggest that we widen that conversation of what we actually mean by health, what we mean by well-being. Widen it in the sense of increasing the scope of that conversation. What does healthy really look like? What does sustainable look like? But also deepen it as well. So I've got some comments and observations to make about that. About 15 years ago, I broke. I had what my parents' generation will refer to as a nervous breakdown, what we now refer to as a mental health crisis. And it was not good, it was not pretty. Don't feel too bad for me, because I have been living off it ever since, almost. But, I thought of that when I started thinking about what to say here. I'm not saying it, health is about balance. Balance between all the different parts of our lives. And one of the things we're really good at doing is ignoring when we're out of balance. Sound familiar? And I ignored that things were completely out of balance in my own life, in my own health. And the crisis is what happens when we don't listen. The crisis is what happens when things continue to be out of balance. Any system that's not in balance takes a lot of energy to keep it going, and eventually runs into a crisis. That's all right. I turned it off.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. It's all right. I'll turn it back on in a minute. Don't worry. Thank you, Joe. So the first thing I say about a crisis is what happens when we don't listen. And that's pretty familiar territory for all of us when we look at the reason you're all here. But it's familiar territory for all of us. I came through it, as you can tell, I'm still here. But you know what, I nearly didn't. And there are people who experienced what I did that aren't here anymore. But I came through it with the help of some great people who were in their gift, they were a gift to me and a gift to the world. And now, the second thing I want to say about a crisis is a great springboard into profound change, like real change, because it forces us to ask the questions that we were ignoring and pay attention to all the things that we weren't paying attention to before the crisis broke. And there are some people who would even say that a crisis is part of the natural process of evolution, of we come through crisis and we launch into a deeper kind of change. So I'm going to say some more about change in a few minutes, but I mentioned about widening the conversation about health. So I'm going to turn my thing back on again. And what the world definitely doesn't need is another Venn diagram, but I use this as a starting point for a lot of my conversations with clients. And this is an example of what I mean about widening the conversation about what does healthy look like. Because it seems nuts to me to have a conversation about personal health and personal mental health without looking at the wider context of what you're doing with your life, with your energy, with your resources, with your talents and your gifts. And we're not very good at that. And there are lots of very sophisticated tools for looking at what we're doing with our lives. This is my really simple one. I like to keep things simple. The balance between our personal life and our family, those closest to us, our well-being, the stuff that's nobody else's business, really, our professional life and all of the stuff that we're doing in our work and in our business, but also our creative life, what I call our generative well-being, our generative or creative health. Now, so many people think of the creative expression as being something for artists or something for professional creatives. But you know, every one of us, every one of you has got something that somewhere in you, you know you were born to do. Nobody can do what you do quite as well as you do it when you're really in your gift and when you really invest in that. And the balance between these three is critical and is a great starting point, because so much in our culture, obviously there's so much emphasis on our professional life, so much emphasis on earning money, so much emphasis on trying to get security, that at the cost of the other. And any system where one element is emphasised at the cost of the others is out of balance. So when I'm talking about well-being, I'm talking about health. When I'm talking about health, I'm talking about balance. When I'm talking about balance, I'm talking about relationship. And any system, and I'm not just talking about simple mechanical balance. If any of you have ever done this thing where you stand on one foot and you notice just how much your body is actually doing to maintain balance, that's dynamic balance. It's a balance that comes through constant change. And health, this is one of the key things I want to get across here. A healthy system is a system or an organism that can change with what's going on around it. And when we don't change with what's going on, we run into some kind of a crisis, which is exactly what happened here. And is exactly why we're all here, the subject matter that we're here for today. So what am I put next here? Oh, I'll come back to him. Uncle Albert. We'll come back to Albert Einstein. So I'm going to send you off again, don't worry, Jake. Okay. So change. I'm not an organisational change specialist. I don't understand, or I don't have a lot of expertise. And a lot of you will have worked with change processes, or I work with people, with individuals. I'm really interested in how we change as individual people and the difference that can make to the people around us. But people who do change processes and system dynamics, they talk about first order and second order and third order change. So without making an idiot of myself and sounding like I really know what I'm talking about, my understanding of that is that first order change is where we make relatively superficial change within the systems and the structures that we have. So we do more of what we're doing, we do it with more energy, or we do more less, so we do less of what's not working. Or we do things better, we improve. And so that's first order change within an existing structure of understanding or process. Second order change is about where we take a step back and we look at what's actually the systems and the structures and that we have that we're working within, and whether they need change and whether they need updating. But third order change is also known as transformation or profound change. And it's a completely different kind of change. It's the kind of change that requires letting go of what you need. Another way of distinguishing these different kinds of change. See, more and better and different being second order change, they all have something in common. They're all reference to what you already know and what you're already doing. Third order change means being willing to let go of the familiar and to take a swan dive into the unknown. And what I'm most interested in people and what I do with people is about third order change, but in the personal domain. There are people who do that in the collective and the organisational. But that's my thing. And so I'm going to wheel in Uncle Albert Einstein here. Here we go. Nobody can bake your noodle quite like Uncle Albert. And I came across this several years ago. And this is actually one of the few things on the internet attributed to Albert Einstein that he actually really did say, because most of what you find on the internet with his name, he never said or never wrote. He actually wrote this. And this was in a letter to the wife of a close friend who had died. And he said this: a human being is part of a whole, called by us the universe, a part limited in time and space. We experience ourselves, our thoughts and our feelings as something separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of our consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circles of compassion, to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in all of its beauty. Now, I love this. There's something so... Now, third order change involves not just looking at what you can see, but looking at how you see. See, it's really hard to see how your eyes actually work and create your reality for you. It's really hard to see how our mind, body, brain, neural system creates our reality, because it does it so well. There's another physicist, David Bohm, who said, thought creates our reality, and then says, I didn't do it. It's really hard to see. See, you and I, we know each other. We know ourselves as being this separate creature. You like a centre of sensitivity and thought and feeling and understanding contained within a bag of skin. That's me, and that's you. That's how you know you. And we know ourselves as something separate from the whole thing. We struggle to find words for it. He used the word universe. You can't really use words to describe it. But the nature itself, we see ourselves as something outside of nature, not something that nature is doing. And one of the things that I'm sure about is that way of seeing is behind most of our ills and struggles as individuals. But maybe that's part of what's going on with humanity. We see ourselves as something outside and separate from nature, not what nature is doing. And this connects with, just keep an eye on time here. I'll probably overshot, haven't I? But a lot of people talk about flow states. There's a lot of talk about flow states. And my theory about what a flow state is when that optical delusion of separateness begins to melt. And the boundary between what you're doing and what is happening begins to melt. And people use phrases and expressions like, it wasn't so much me doing it as it kind of happening through me. Now, I could spend a lot more time talking about this, but what I would love for you, with whatever it is that's brought you here, whatever it is that you're doing in business, in your work, I would love you to know what you're doing like a force of nature, like something that found you rather than you found it. Something that the whole thing is doing, and you're playing it, you're collaborating it. It's a totally different way of seeing what we're up to. Totally different way of seeing it. So I'm going to finish with this. One of my mentors when I first came into transformational work told us this. The best thing you can do for the people that you love and the world you care about is to live a great life. That's pretty profound. That, to me, is what I mean by well-being, what I mean by health. About a really healthy relationship with your own self, with the world around you, with other people, and with life itself, whatever that means. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Steve. Any burning questions for Steve? We've got a couple of questions. Time for a couple of questions, then we have to proceed.
Yep. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Steve. Always an amazing presenter. You help us actually dig deeper into ourselves. And the reason for this project, Collective Innovation to Fight Climate Change, was that we collectively can make a change. So if you're not living a great life, if you don't realize what is happening around you, how would you actually fight climate change? You cannot fight climate change by yourself. I cannot do it. You cannot do it. But collectively, we can. But we need to be very self-aware of who we are and why we are doing that.
Yes.
And how can we actually live a great life if potentially our kids would not have a life because we know what's happening around the world.
Good question.
So it's just a statement, but...
Yeah, and obviously we have a lot of cultural ideas about what greatness looks like, whether it's fame or repute or great success or financial accumulation. And you know that that's not what I'm talking about. The greatness, real greatness, is something way beyond that, way deeper than that, way wider than that. And but here's what I'd also say. When we are in, I mentioned just briefly flow states, when we're in that state of listening and going with and flowing with, we're connected to the deeper intelligence underneath life, the intelligence that produced us, that produced all of this. And I'm in no way advocating, I'll just kind of put your feet up and let it all take its course. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is our chances of creating effective behaviour, effective change, effective actions are far greater when we're listening and connected more deeply, rather than just in our heads chasing short-term disconnected things. At the other end of that, though, we're not capable of engineering what's needed, purely. It's going to need a deeper inspiration than that, a deeper intelligence than that.
But this is why I do agree with you, because you cannot do anything in life unless you are self-aware, unless you dig deeper in who you are.
Yes.
Because you can live in the, what was the diagram you didn't want to show, but you showed. So for me at the moment, because I'm running a startup, it's just professional.
Yeah.
There's no personal, there's no creative.
Yeah.
So you've got, probably a lot of the startups would do say the same. Yeah, so
yeah.
My point is, you need to be, all of us, we need to know who we are in order to make a change. And we can only make a change collectively. Because Marcella cannot do it herself with 40 years of experience. But if we find a way, for example, to help people like Marcella,
absolutely,
collectively, we can do it.
Two things. I had a beautiful expression recently. Somebody described bubbles of sanity like being a bubble of sanity. You're an individual bubble of sanity. And the bubbles are beginning to join up, because everywhere I go, I meet people who are exhibiting a deeper kind of sanity, a kind of sanity that is connected and listening to the whole, to listening to nature in the way that Einstein's, and realizing that who we are is the whole thing. Second thing I'd say is he used that expression of widening our circles of compassion. It starts with you. It starts with me as individuals. And what we are, who we are, will naturally radiate who and what we are. That bit we can't help. That's just natural. So how we're being, who we're being, is as vital as what we're doing. The energy behind it is vital. And then those ripples, will take care of themselves. Does that make sense? Someone else saw another hand somewhere. Addy, can you just
quick.
microphone?
Very quick because we are pretty much late.
Okay,
The last one.
what pulled you out of the nervous breakdown? Friend's going through something bad at the moment. Yeah, what pulled you out of it?
Yeah, in very brief, a friend of mine had had some issues, and he recommended a therapist that he'd worked with. And this guy was an older guy who was in his third career. He'd been a banker, he'd been, I think, something else, and then he trained in 3 or 4 disciplines of therapy. And he was just exactly the person that I needed. And then after that, I stumbled across a place in North London called the Concordia Institute, which is like a holistic health and transformational education foundation. And that's where I started in this conversation, but with sort of a lot of drawing on a lot of help from other writers and authors and sages from all over the place. But it took a while.
Thank you for being alive and still being here.
Yeah, I'm awash with gratitude.